Good morning. Welcome to the Community Voice. I'm Steve Gradick, your host. Delighted to have you with us on this brand new week, and welcome in. We're very honored to have in a return appearance General Charles Wilhelm, 4-star General U.S. Marine Corps, and retired, a resident of Carroll County. I've got a brief bio. His bio, of course, is going to be very long, but we have an abbreviated version, so let me jump right into that. General Charles Wilhelm, being our guest, is the highest-ranking military officer who resides in Carroll County. General Wilhelm served in the United States Marine Corps, achieving the rank of 4-star general until his retirement in 2000. He served 2 combat duties in Vietnam. He later served as commanding general of the 1st Marine Division and as Assistant Secretary of Defense. General Wilhelm served as Commander Marine Forces Somalia in Operation Restore Hope. Additionally, he served as Commander of the U.S. Southern Command for 3 years before his retirement. General Wilhelm's full biography and military career can be found on his Wikipedia page. There's only a little piece of a note here. There have been only 75 4-star generals in the history of the U.S. Marine Corps. Of these, 57 achieved the rank while on active duty. General Wilhelm's appearance today is to mark the anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, and to compare the history surrounding the beginnings of World War II with the geopolitical crisis facing the world today. We're going to do that, but just kind of to emphasize the point before we go to our first break, we're going to take a couple of minutes. I think we all have heard, or most everybody has heard, the breaking news about Syria being overrun by the rebels and the Assad regime after a half century of he and his father is now over. And so it's pretty significant. Saturday night on December 7th, Assad fell. And America's got, from what I understand, close to 1,000 troops in Syria and actively fighting ISIS in Syria. So, General, let me give us a little bit of your insight and interpretation of what's going on there.
Well, first of all, good morning, Steve, and thank you for having me on the program again. Insofar as the situation in Syria is concerned, I think the unknowns far outnumber the knowns at this point. Like so many important events on the geopolitical stage that occur in this day and age, it's the speed with which they take place. Now, there has been a dissident insurgent movement in Syria for quite some time, but it boiled over in very, very rapid form. I think you really hit the key point. Syria, and I'll use the word, has suffered for a half a century under the rule of the Assad family. Hafez Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad, who now resides in Moscow, as best we know, were both, quite frankly, tyrannical figures. Infamously, Hafez Assad, the father, was really responsible for what has been referred to as the Hama solution. He actually used poison gas to kill 5,000 people in the town of Hama, which expressed dissatisfaction with his rule. Now, in the here and now, what does all of this mean? I think it's bad news for Russia. 2 very important bases for them, one naval, one air force, which serve really as their primary lodgment in the Middle East and also their staging base and stepping off point for their activities in Africa, are up for question now. How will this evolve with the new regime in whatever form the new regime takes in Damascus? That's an unanswered question. Not surprising to me, the Israelis reacted to this, and they reacted instantly. There's been a buffer zone on the Golan Heights since 1974, and the Israeli Defense Force rapidly moved to occupy key positions on that high ground as part of their efforts to ensure that their country isn't victimized from its border regions. So that's in the realm of bidding. I think it's bad news for Iran, which of course has really engaged in an awful lot of mischief in the Middle East, largely through its proxies. Then a question that I think should concern all of us is, what will the composition of the new government of Syria be? And one of the points that I think we really need to focus on, and I'm sure our intelligence community will work very vigilantly on, is, will ISIS be part of the construct? So just kind of the tentacles that surround this event, that's kind of the way I see it right now, and I'm sure that a lot of midnight oil is going to be burned in Washington, in Moscow, and elsewhere while we sort out what the new Syria, if there is a new Syria, looks like.
Our guest this morning is General Charles Wilhelm, 4-star General U.S. Marine Corps, retired and resident of Carroll County. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about Pearl Harbor and recognize the anniversary of it. And then we may, we're going to roundabout hit Ukraine and back to the Middle East. So it's going to be very interesting. Stay with us.
Consider the Mobius strip. Take a strip of paper, twist it, connect the ends. This connection forms a continuous loop. Seamless, infinite. That's how your healthcare should be too. At Tanner Health, the Mobius is our symbol and our promise, representing our continuum of care and our commitment that the services you need will be here for you always. We're not just changing healthcare, we're redefining it. See more at tanner.org.
The customized academic scholar journey at Oak Mountain Academy is individually designed to provide students with a personalized, clearly defined academic track that earns the student a series of distinctions upon graduation. This journey enables academically driven students to pursue a focused, rigorous course of study personalized to their wants and desires. I'm Patrick Uran, head of school, inviting you to journey with us on the mountain. For more information, visit us at oakmountain.us. Discover your journey at OMA. Prepare, explore, and achieve.
Welcome back to the Community Voice. We're very honored to have in the studio on a return visit. For some reason, he decided to come back. It shows the level of courage this man has. General Charles Wilhelm, 4-star Marine Corps General, retired. We brought you in, not so much to talk about Syria, and we'll do some more of that, but Saturday marked the anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. As FDR said in his famous speech, a day that will live in infamy. For those who maybe are so young and don't even, haven't really heard of Pearl Harbor, and unfortunately there are a lot of people out there. Kind of give us a little recap. You were born in 1941. You were born in the same year that Pearl Harbor was attacked. Tell us, just give us that little recap of history, if you would.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I think taking a very, detailed look at history is important. Man has only generated one perpetual motion machine, and that is history. It never stops, and it never ends. If we look back to the 7th of December of 1941, the arc of history has been 83 years. And you and I talked last week, it is so important that we not overlook the 3,400 men and women on the island of Hawaii who were either killed or wounded during the Japanese attack. And of course, kind of the signal issue was the USS Arizona, the 1,177 Marines and sailors who went down with their ship, and the 900 who remain entombed within the sunken hull. We'd be remiss, very remiss, if we didn't recall their sacrifice. But I think it's important that we not allow it to end right there. History is instructive. And over the past 83 years, a lot of things have changed. Some things have remained the same. And I think if we look at Pearl Harbor, what led up to it, what the circumstances and conditions were at the time, it's important to draw those distinctions. I'll mention just a few. First, friends and enemies. Friends and enemies. Bit of a paradox here. Mm-hmm. Our three adversaries on 7 December 1941 are now three of our most prominent allies. Of course, I'm speaking of Germany, Italy, and Japan. And then we look at the array of nations that we fell shoulder to shoulder with to defeat that threat. Two of our primary antagonists today, Russia and China, former friends. Some folks don't like to call them enemies. They prefer to call them competitors. I just call them adversaries. Their goals and their aspirations don't necessarily align very clearly with ours. And if it's competition, it's stern competition. And then there's the issue of geographics. Of course, World War II was a world war, and there was scarcely a single place on the globe that wasn't touched in one way or another. But we had two primary theaters of war, and that was Europe and the Pacific. Today, if you really think through, well, we just talked about Syria. We have three. Mm-hmm. Europe, we have the Russians in Ukraine. We have the Pacific Theater, the expansionist activities of China and their Belt and Road grand strategy. And then we have the Middle East. And let's bear in mind, for the first 2 decades of the 21st century, we've been involved in conflict in the Middle East. So the geographics are also interesting. Then there's the issue of resources. I took just a quick look on the internet, like everybody else does, to see kind of what were our troop levels on the 7th of December of 1941, and what are our troop levels right now. To my surprise, because I hadn't looked at the force structure 83 years ago, we had a roughly 2.2 million people wearing uniforms of one sort or another in 1941. Today, if we look at our active, reserve, and National Guard, it's about 2.2 million. It's the same. Now, the interesting question arises is, if we do, in fact, get into a significant war with a near-peer competitor, what will the force look like? Well, as World War II wore on, 16.5 million men and women donned the uniforms of our armed forces. Now, would we need to expand to a level like that? Could we expand to a level like that? My answer to both those questions is no. It's not necessary. The nature of and the character of warfare has changed remarkably over 83 years. And so if we look at manpower as a resource, that would require a different computation. Do I see any more 4- and 5-year wars if they involve peer competitors? No. I think they'll begin and end rather quickly for a variety of reasons, many of the reasons driven by technology. Then we look at the resources. What resources would we have to commit in terms of, say, capital investment? The number that I've seen that World War II, in terms of our gross national product, GNP, consumed 47%. Can you imagine that? Mm-hmm. Right now, today, defense and security consumes 3%. Mm-hmm. How much more would we have to commit to a large-scale conflict today? And would money really be the issue? Because we have another resource, and that's our defense industrial base. The defense industrial base that supported our forces and the forces of most of the rest of the world during World War II, to me, is one of the staggering successes and one of the most impressive programs this country has ever carried out. Just a few numbers. During World War II, our industrial base stopped making automobiles and started making tanks. They made 88,500 tanks. Aircraft, even more amazing. We started off with a very, very modest force of about 1,300 airplanes, and during the course of the war, this shocked me. Military aircraft of all sorts, our aircraft industry stopped making passenger aircraft and made 300,000 aircraft of various descriptions. The Navy was not different as well, and I'm going to confer to a note here just real quickly. Let's see, what did we do with our Navy here? We expanded our fleet from 350 ships. Now these are battle force fleets, to 4,221, of which 99 were aircraft carriers. Today, our battle fleet is 286 ships against a goal of 355, at least the goal established in 2016, and 11 carriers, 11 aircraft carriers versus 99. It's just that I believe that our captains of industry were the least recognized but the most deserving of recognition of all members of the national team that fought and won World War II.
In that context, prior to World War II, there had been a strong isolationist approach as far as America getting into the European or Pacific War. Pearl Harbor changed that. How did, thinking about comparing, you mentioned the 3% and the 47%, and we think about our parents and how they were fully engaged, both mother and father, and just as civilians, and my father in the Navy, as part of the war effort. How different is America today than then? And how would we today respond to a situation such as Pearl Harbor?
You know, that was the last issue that I was going to talk about, but I think it's good that you brought it up now. I think the most fragile component of our national strength is national will. You look back to the beginning of World War II, and then you look at the 5 years that followed. During that time, 16.5 million people donned the uniform, as I mentioned before. At the time, our population was about 131 million, and that was 9% of our population served actively in the military, and that doesn't include these heroes in the industrial base that I've just talked about. I think we need to really think about that. And, it was all hands on deck. Everyone joined the war element.
Everyone.
We know about Rosie the Riveter. We know about all the posters that were generated, and they were all truth. These were not made-up stories. At least in my mind, and this is just my opinion, national will has become an episodic sort of thing right now. Looking at the years since World War II, honestly, Steve, I can only come up with the 11th of September of 2001 was the last time I really saw all hands on deck. I saw all the flags flying. I saw this nation fully unified. It's occurred to me in recent years, and a lot of this has been driven, I think, by exactly what we're doing now, the way information is exchanged. And the quality of the information that is exchanged has been very variable. But I just don't see the same ability to really all pull together. As I've commented on more than one occasion, to me sometimes it seemed that the U in USA has remained silent.
I agree. Post 9/11, for many months, it seemed like we were completely unified. I have to ask, because in the last several years with the Ukraine situation, it's been posed that we're facing a potential nuclear exchange. Obviously, at the start of or when Pearl Harbor happened, there were no nuclear weapons. Now there are thousands of them, I suppose. So how do you evaluate that threat today with what's going on across the world?
Well, as far as weapons are concerned, I place them in two categories. We've moved into a different direction. We have weapons of mass destruction, which include the 1,550, which under New START, both Russia and the United States are authorized to have. And of course, those would really, that would be a cataclysmic outcome. Could end life on the planet, as we all know, based on just physics and science. But I think it's more likely that future conflict would be more greatly invested in weapons of mass effect. The phrase cyber Pearl Harbor has been used fairly frequently within military circles. Just think about the fact if we really suffered a cyber attack on the scale of the attack that occurred at Pearl Harbor, what would that yield?
What would that look like?
Yeah, the more you think about it, the more drastic it becomes. We couldn't communicate. Your cell phones would be useless.
Gone.
Our air traffic control system would be shut down and gone.
No radio and TV.
No radio and television. There would be much of our distribution systems, whether they're the energy grid, whether it's our fuel distribution system, and you could go on for about a half an hour talking about the things that we would no longer have access to, and I don't know exactly. I don't get classified folders anymore. I'm confident that organizations like the United States Space Command, like the National Security Agency, and for that matter, all of the commercial entities that are involved in communications are working actively to make sure that we have measures to respond to this. But, there are things out there that are concerning. The new families of weapons that don't necessarily have nuclear warheads. What about hypersonic weapons? Weapons that are delivered at a speed greater than 5 times the speed of sound. Vladimir Putin has said that Russia has weapons in that category that can fly at Mach 20 times the speed of sound. I don't think we're prepared to deal with that, and we've been a little late coming to the table. We know that research and development efforts are underway within the Department of Defense to develop weapons of this sort, and also means to counteract them. But so when we look at weapons of mass destruction, and then we consider weapons of mass effect, such as cyber kinds of capabilities, it really makes the calculation interesting. I personally believe that an all-out nuclear exchange probably wouldn't happen. Employment of tactical nuclear weapons, a possibility. Where Russia is concerned, once heard a guy quip that the 1,550 ceiling does not apply to tactical weapons. Those are strategic weapons. The comment was, if the Russians could make a nuclear round for a pistol, they would.
With all that said, what kind of risk do we face with the war in Ukraine, with the unsettled Middle East, and a somewhat aggressive Chinese Communist Party looking at Taiwan? What's the risk level of the world overall, in your opinion?
I think it changes almost day by day. And in many cases, it changes based on changes in the personalities calling the shots. We just had a presidential election, and the two candidates that we considered have very, very markedly different views on how to proceed from this point forward. The one subject I do not discuss is politics. I'm a military officer. I serve the American people. I don't really serve a political master. But the issue of personalities plays. That's going to play out in Syria. Who ends up calling the shots in Syria? Putin is well entrenched in Russia. He is over 70 years old, but despite the stories we hear, I believe he's in reasonably good health. President Xi in China is modified the Constitution. He could well be a leader for life. And then we look at the difference between secular governments and theocracies in the Middle East. You know, how do you engage a theocracy? Dealing with terrorists in the Middle East, dealing with ISIS, we reached the conclusion it's a lot easier to kill a bad man than it is to kill a bad idea. And so with all of these variables, it's hard to really predict in which direction it would go. Why does China really want Taiwan?
Why is that?
Well, I think there's one reason, and this may not be the primary reason in Xi's in his list of wants, but microprocessors.
But I understand,
we let that get away from us.
But I understand that the Communist Chinese don't know how to manufacture them. So, I mean, they're.
Well, see, that's part of the mythology. We say that China is the world's primary manufacturer of microprocessors. And, I mean, let's just quickly, microprocessors.
Right.
We don't have cars anymore. We have rolling computers.
That's a
We
fact.
don't have airplanes anymore. We have flying computers.
That's a
We don't
fact.
have ships anymore. We have floating computers. The last numbers I saw, Taiwan makes 47% of the world's microprocessors. China only 15%.
Right.
And the departing administration has mentioned the need, in addition to shortening the supply chain and causing more of the supply chain to originate in the United States, a principal goal has to be a very, very effective entry into the microprocessor market. It all starts there.
Yeah, particularly with artificial intelligence and the need.
Okay, there's the other great unknown.
Yeah.
Where does that take us?
Right.
There's a book out written by an Israeli author. The title is Nexus. And this book tracks the way that information has been imparted and how it's impacted civilization from the Stone Age to AI. It's a little bit of a difficult read, but I would encourage anyone who really wants to try to get their arms around AI. And quite frankly, I have no idea where it begins and ends.
It is. I had the privilege of touring the Arizona Memorial and Hickam Air Force Base and seeing the bullet holes in the buildings. Before we run out of time, if you would, particularly being a Marine and the role of the Marines in World War II, kind of give us a flavor of that sacrifice and what young men and now women do in terms of the armed forces, and particularly in the Marines, and what it takes to serve in a combat capacity.
Yeah, again, going back to kind of our basic premise that we talk about then and now. Then, the 2.2 million men who were in uniform at that time, at the beginning of World War II, were referred to as citizen soldiers. They were people who were called and obliged to serve. And I would say it's different now. With the advent of the all-volunteer force, I think we have soldier citizens. These are people who've made a conscious decision, men and women, 20% of them women now, that they would adapt the profession of arms as a beginning point for their actual life in a professional atmosphere. The military for them is a profession. Now, it may be a 4-year profession, or in my case, and others like me, a 40-year profession, but a profession nonetheless. And we get into the issue of quantity versus quality. And mass is no longer the measure of effectiveness. It's not massing people, it's massing capabilities. And that, I think, we've become very, very good at. I look at precision-guided munitions, and I look at some of the missions that were flown in Vietnam while I was there. Many of them in North Vietnam to take out bridges, which were key to interrupting the supply lines for the North Vietnamese moving men and the implements of war to the south into South Vietnam. We had a configuration that we called an Alpha Strike, which could include as many as 40 aircraft to go after a bridge. Now you can do it with 2, with a 99% probability of kill, provided you can get to the target.
Greater chance of coming home, too.
Absolutely. So, technology is a big player now. And so it's not so much how many you are, it's who you are, and it's not how many you have, it's what you have that will influence the future outcomes of conflicts.
For a young person in high school, or even the parents of a young person in high school, what would you say to them if they're considering a career or service in the military?
The first thing I would say to them is today's military is not for everyone. There are a certain number of young people who I think both by attitude, upbringing, and just their general personality and character are well suited to serve. To make it clear, the problem that we have is getting the numbers of young people we have with the attributes we seek. It's somewhat alarming to me. We have something we call the QMA, Qualified Military Applicant. These are young men and women between the ages of 17 and 24. That's the target audience for recruiting. With a population of 336 million and a need for 2.2 million in uniform, that's less than 0.5%. But it's not easy to come by. Today's young people are not as inclined to serve in the military. But then we look at those who do step forward and say, I want to join. Only 3 out of 10 can pass initial qualification. Why? There's physical, there's mental, and there's moral. Physical, we have too many young people that are overweight. They can't meet the height and weight standards of the military. Mental, they have to pass the Armed Forces Qualification Test Battery. Our system of public education is not producing high school graduates, and that's who we're after, who can pass the test. And then morally, drugs, alcohol, and contacts of a discreditable nature with civilian authorities. 3 out of 10. Now, we can, through the hard work of our recruiters, correct some of those problems. People who are overweight can lose weight. People who fail the AFQT can go back and really kind of re-examine and reinforce their academic backgrounds to the point that they can pass a reasonable test. On the moral side, we draw very, very hard lines in the sand. You have to be an honorable person to serve.
Well, thank you for coming in this morning. I think it's important to, as we try to do on D-Day, to remember the heroes that served, and particularly the people and the servicemen and women at Pearl Harbor and the civilians that paid that sacrifice for our freedoms today. Our gratitude to General Charles E. Wilhelm for coming in for a second time, brave enough to come in, and a lot going on. And we're grateful to you for your service and to all who serve in the Marine Corps Semper Fi. And thank you for listening. We thank our sponsors, Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy. Go out and make it a great day. You're in tune to WLBB Carrollton.